Well, joining us now, a very special guest, Suman Bery, Vice Chairman of the NITI Aayog. Thanks, sir, very much for being with us. The economic survey has spoken about the need to generate 80 lakh jobs every single year for the Indian economy to be able to grow at the rate that we wanted to, for the next 20 years. Do you believe enough was said by Nirmala Sitharaman in the budget today to ensure that that takes place?
Vishnu, I like to formulate both the problem and the solution in the budget in slightly different terms, if I may, because the concept is of an employment ratio, and India has a way to go before its employment ratio is at international levels. So there are two things going on here. One is that for a range of reasons, often connected with people being in higher education, etc., people in the relevant age group are not yet in the labor force. And secondly, there is a demographic bulge coming. I'm saying all this because the right way to think of India's employment challenge is in terms of better work and not necessarily jobs, because it can often be self-employment. And so against that formulation, what I think this budget does and breaks new ground is to give a kickstart to the process of getting our existing youth better equipped for higher productivity jobs. And let me expand, if I may, on the elements of the design of the programs that should contribute to that. I think there is this distinction in India between employment in the informal sector, which has been the dominant part of employment, and employment in the formal sector. And I think something like 90% or a bit less than that now of jobs have been in the informal sector. Now, what does it mean to be in the informal sector? It means that it's sort of casual employment. Nobody's investing in you. And so the schemes in this budget are designed to create incentives at the level of the individual and at the level of the firm, particularly in manufacturing, to induce people to enter in large numbers into the formal sector. And it's the belief is that once in the formal sector, and the marker of that is being registered with the EPFO, you then start to get on-the-job training, which is a very important part of raising productivity. You get a chance to parade your skills. So what I see happening in the various initiatives of this budget is not unlike what the Government of India tried to do with some success in the so-called production-linked incentive schemes, which was to provide a push to a relationship that where there was no matchmaker. This is, so that's what I see these schemes as being about. But you had another question about the impact on growth. Am I right? Yeah. Okay. So for this to have an impact on growth, at one level, the algebra is quite simple, that if you have more people working in higher productivity activities, well, that's growth for you, okay? So this comes back to the question of, the 7 million jobs per year, which, by the way, is a lower number than people sometimes bandy around. Not all of them will be in the formal sector, but we would hope that formal sector employment will over time become a multiple of what it's been for the reasons I mentioned. So the key thing really is, how do you keep productivity rising? Because it's only when productivity rises, A, that you can get growth, but B, that compensation rises.
So one of the interesting aspects of the budget is the fiscal deficit, which at 4.9%, under 5%, seems to be quite positive. Do you believe that that would have an impact on India's credit standing, as it were?
I do. So I would say that that's not the only reason to welcome this, but certainly fiscal credibility is important, including, frankly, with the RBI. The RBI has more room to manage its monetary policy if it knows what the fiscal glide path is. But I think the underlying reason, Vishnu, is a more important one, which is that underlying this budget is what I would call a couple of handoffs from the public sector to the private sector. One is that the public sector kept investment going through the COVID period, and when the private sector, both MSME and large scale, was also affected by COVID. Now I think there's enough momentum that I would hope that the private sector, with the right policies, would be inclined to invest, but equally their ability to invest is impacted by the cost of capital. And one thing that keeps the cost of capital up domestically, I'm not talking about the international dimensions alone, domestically, is what you might call crowding out of the available savings by the need to finance the government. So the two things are internally consistent. If you want a private investment boom, then the public sector needs to withdraw, and the best measure of that is what's happening to the fiscal deficit. Let me just say that at the end of the day, it's not only the central government's fiscal deficit that matters. The fiscal deficit of the states matter as well, but it takes time for those numbers to be aggregated. But if you add both the center and states together, India, for a fast-growing economy, probably has still in aggregate a somewhat higher fiscal deficit than you would expect as compared to its peers. So I think there is a need for consolidation, but it must be accompanied by monetary easing if we are to maintain fast growth. And it makes possible monetary easing, which is...
One final question, Mr. Bery. Private consumption at 4%, GDP growth very robust at 8%. So there's a big gap between the two. Again, has enough been done to drive private consumption in this budget?
Are you talking about across the board, or particularly rural consumption? I mean, I would say that, economists have something...
No, so you make a key point, and since it's come up on, quite frequently, let's focus on rural consumption, because that's an area of concern.
One of the theorems of economics is what they call the permanent income hypothesis, which is that households in particular, and we're talking about households, essentially manage their, if you like, their consumption and saving behavior over a cycle. Now, we have been through a lot of shocks, weather shocks, the COVID shock as well. And so I don't think we need to need to overreact just yet, because the top line number, the 8% growth number, is a good number. A different question might be that will this stagnation or sluggishness in consumption affect the investment intentions of private industry? And I think that's the right question. And I would say that there are various safety nets in place. I would just say, and there's a lot in this budget about unleashing the, if you like, the potential of the non-crop agricultural sector. So I would say that this is not an occasion for knee-jerk reaction. We need to see whether this is sustained.
Right. Suman Bery, thank you very much for being with us, sharing your thoughts on the state of the economy in the context of the budget which has been presented.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to seeing it.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break. There's more coming up.